Hello everyone! Welcome to yet another day in the clown decade, where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And yet we are at that weird, almost middle part of this decade story, where we start to see a few things that should give us a bit of hope. And given that the subject of today's video is Navarra Media having an almost panic attack video about a trend that is going on TikTok, it makes me think that, maybe there is hope after all. And the video is called What the Hell is a Tradwife? And as you can already see from the design of the thumbnail, it's already trying to put it on a racial line. I think Navarra are genuinely subtly trying to say this is actually a race thing already before we've got into the video, with all the tradwives in the background having all weird faces because they're talking, because people look weird when you take stills while they're talking, and Ash Sarkar with a relatively normal face in the middle, making her look comparatively pretty. So with way more analysis done on the thumbnail than is probably necessary, we may as well get into this video, because I think I should talk about tradwives too, being the supreme simp commander, and still pushing for every man to simp for real queens. I know that I have found my real queen that I simp for, and I hope all of you one day find your real queen too. They're out there, just be yourself, you'll find them, I believe in you. Now let's hear from Ash Sarkar.
Lately, I've been seeing this thing pop up on social media.
We are going to talk about how you can become a traditional wife.
How I went from a raging, free the nipple feminist
to becoming a traditional feminine woman.
The ways that I live traditionally in our modern world.
I don't understand. What's the point of, arguing with?
I don't know, just seems like a load of women who seem happy with their lives and who seem to want to spread how they can spread this happiness, and how other people, or women specifically, can live a life like them where they are happy. And it might not work for everyone, but that's the point. This is advice for people who want it.
Immaculately made-up women gazing wide-eyed into their phones, singing the praises of being a tradwife or traditional wife.
Which is a strange criticism coming from Ash Sarkar, given that in all her videos she glams herself up a bit, she clearly puts makeup, lipstick, the works on, and espouses leftist nonsense. So, Ash, if your issue is with what they're saying, focus on that. Don't say they glam themselves up, because absolutely every woman on earth who ever has or knows are going to have a camera in their face glams themselves up. Because women like looking pretty, and if they know they're going to be looked at, they are absolutely going to try their best to look pretty. So, weird thing to say. And yes, I did purposely choose a bad still of Ash because she did it to all the other women in the thumbnail. I thought I'd just get it back for you ladies.
I'll let her explain.
If you are not familiar with the term tradwife, it is a woman who chooses to live a more traditional life with ultra-traditional gender roles. So the man goes outside the house, works, provides for the family. The woman stays home and she's the homemaker. She takes care of the home and the children if there are any.
I mean, I will be fair here, that is a bit of an extreme of the idea of tradwifery, because it's just a bad way of putting it. It's not that the woman stays home, it's that she looks after the house, and that is inevitably going to mean having to leave the house to go shopping, to do fun activities with the kids, if they have any. And women will, of course, have their own hobbies, and they will probably either say, if it's using my own mother as an example, knitting, yes, she can do that while she stays home and watches the TV or something like that, but she also needs to get the wool from somewhere, and she doesn't just stay in the house for that. She does local voluntary stuff for the local church, for the carnival we have every year, and, the whole family gets involved with that eventually. How does my dad get involved? Well, he's working most of the time, though he's at an age where he's semi-retired, so he plays golf as well, and he also does DIY stuff around the house, and also for my siblings' houses as well, and eventually I hope my house as well. Whereas when mum's over, she has suggestions on what they can do with the house and things like that, because she was the homemaker and my dad was the one who made the homemakery work. And realistically, that's what most traditional families are going to be like. I mean, my mum did used to work, but then when she had me as the third kid, went back to work for quite a bit, but when life got a lot more comfortable, she started working less, started doing more voluntary things, and was the one really looking after the kids a bit more, where my dad was the one going abroad for business purposes, getting money in for the family and things like that. And that is generally what people mean by a traditional family. It's either the woman works less or not at all, to focus more on making the house a home, and making the majority of the decisions inside the home that do make it a lot more homely, a lot more safe, and a lot more comfortable for everyone who lives there. And that is probably actually the most important part of the family life. Having the place where they live be somewhere where everyone feels safe, comfortable, and while they are not stressing out at work or school. It's incredibly important. I don't think I can actually put enough emphasis on how important that is. But I'd like to see what Ash Sarkar's problem is with this particular extreme example of tradwifery.
Thanks for that. Though the idea of women being confined to the home while men do things like go outside and work isn't exactly new, the image of 1950s suburban domesticity has been given a new lease of life by the gals on TikTok.
I did actually find that quite funny how... I mean, this is very much a 1950s aesthetic, probably because it was a very lovely aesthetic. But in the 1950s clips of the women stay at home and the men go out and work, I mean, this is actually an example of a man doing some DIY within the house. Again, probably something that his wife has suggested that he do, saying, oh, I want a nice archway. Either can you get someone to do it or can you do it yourself? And the man being a man says, well, that seems easy, simple enough, I can just do it myself. And so this isn't a great example of men going out working, unless, of course, he is a professional handyman or builder, but... I mean, just from the looks of this looks like he's wearing clothes that he'd wear at home, so, again, not a great example of this, Ash.
Some younger millennials and Zoomers have decided to embrace living la vida casserole, dedicating themselves to cooking, cleaning, and child rearing, while their husbands or boyfriends, I don't know, chop firewood or go to their job in human resources. I
mean, she does bring up a good point. I don't exactly know what these TikTok tradwives' husbands or boyfriends actually do with their lives. I'm going to be honest, I don't think it's going to be them chopping firewood. I'm probably not going to a HR job either, given that women take up majority of HR roles. But from what I understand, some of these trad TikTok women do feature their boyfriends and husbands in their TikToks, showing obviously how they're having a happy life. And so I think it's fair to assume that they have fairly comfortable jobs that can provide an income for both of them. But I mean, really, who cares about that, Ash? This is about how women can live comfortably.
And look, I'm not saying there's anything inherently degrading about being a mum or making nice meals. I like cooking elaborate dinners. For that matter, my boyfriend does too.
Yeah, and that's fine. Again, you're taking these TikToks that are advertising it in, you know, quite a fundamentalist way, rather than seeing TikTok for what it mainly is, where people are going to show you the fundamentalist way. The idea is that this is the ideal, universally, but then when it comes to individual relationships, obviously it's going to be different. You know, I've cooked for my girlfriend quite a lot. She enjoys my cooking, and I like making meals that she enjoys. She has done the cooking for me, and it's reciprocal there. We're not living together yet, and I'm not yet on a wage that can support us both, but when I am, who knows? Maybe it will move to something like this. I don't know yet. That's something we're obviously going to be talking about in the future. I just want to do whatever makes her happy. And if these women are happy and want to share to other women how they have made themselves happy, I don't see a problem with that.
But the tradwife trend isn't just a way to talk about the experience of being a woman and doing domestic labour.
Here we go, we're going straight into this is all political, actually. Which, to be fair, there is somewhat of a crossover. Quite a lot of tradwives, or the real queens, that I know, such as Abby Shapiro or Lauren Chen, they are somewhat political figures, obviously Lauren Chen to a larger extent. And they have done videos on how to be a tradwife, essentially. Abby Shapiro constantly goes on about dressing modestly and things like that. And again, they're both sharing how they're happy, but it's quite funny. Ash Sarkar doesn't talk about these particular women, which makes it even weirder, because the ones on TikTok don't seem to be political at all. So if you're going to make this point, why not get examples of tradwives who are being explicitly political, like Lauren Chen, like Abby Shapiro? I guess it's because they're not on TikTok.
It's saying that being a woman, or expressing your femininity most fully, means doing all the domestic labour.
Yeah, it's a daily chore. And even men I know who are living with their girlfriends or wives, I mean, to be honest, for a start, most of them have cleaners anyway, but the women do it because they have a lot more time, and they're going to have a lot more time because they're not working, and they are well aware that the men, their husbands, boyfriends, whatever, are out there working. And ones that I know that do want a life like this, and do both have to work at the moment, well, they both share the cleaning chores. So again, Ash is taking this kind of fundamentalist ideal of being a tradwife and saying, oh, they're saying that all women need to be like this to be happy and express their femininity, when really, that's not really what they're saying. They're just saying it's a utopian ideal. And finding something on the road to that is probably going to be individuals' ideal before they get to that extreme. But some women might like the extreme. But from what I understand from tradwives, they are not saying that you need to do all the cleaning, you need to be the only child carer in the relationship. I don't think they're saying that at all, but Ash isn't giving them that leeway because she can't, because she thinks everything has to be extreme and ideological, because she is extreme and ideological, and I don't actually think she can take a nuanced stance on anything. I genuinely think she's incapable of that.
Men and women are meant to have rigidly distinct roles in the home, in their relationships, and crucially, in economic activity.
So there I have a big problem with that language. She says, oh, they're meant to do this. Again, I don't think these TikToks are saying that. I think they're saying the ideal, or these particular women's ideal, is that. But to Ash, an ideal is how things are meant to be, because she is ideological and extreme.
So this isn't just about personal choice or individual preferences, it's advancing a right-wing political ideology and dressing it up as a lifestyle.
Do you see what I mean? This is just perfect projection. This is because any ideal that Ash Sarkar pushes forward, it is actually because she is dressing up what ideals are as a political message, and so she thinks that this is what tradwives are doing. But as I say, nothing I have seen from these clips that she has shown is fundamentally political in any way. So Ash really has to show how they're being political here, and let's see how that goes for her.
So, why is this important? 3 things. These women are often really young.
Of course they're really young, they're on TikTok. TikTok predominantly has a load of really young people on it. But I don't see the issue with that.
In their 20s.
Oh, so they're adults. So they are completely capable of understanding what they're doing and completely capable of making these rational decisions. So what's the issue here?
And they're preaching the values of submitting to a husband to an audience of other young women.
So at what age would this be okay? At what age can these tradwives thread their happiness to other women? Like, what's the limit there, Ash? What is the problem here? You've just said it's a problem. Young women are telling other young women how they live. What? I think the worst problem with that as well, like, with Ash's criticism, is that she has to say young women because she's trying to infer that these young women don't know what they're doing and that they're actually teenagers or kids. But that's not the case. These people are adults. There is no problem here. There's nothing more to say. Ash is just being an idiot. I think what she's done is said, I can't just say there are 2 problems. I need to go with that magic number 3. And then this first one is not really a problem, she just needed something to complain about.
The tradwife trend doesn't exist in isolation. It's linked to deeply regressive political and social movements such as Christian and white nationalism and anti-feminism.
Feminism is an ideology which cannot be defended by feminists.
So there are links to deeply regressive things such as Christianity, which Christian teaching is universal and timeless, so I don't understand how that's regressive. Well, I do to a communist, to be fair. And anti-feminists like it. Well, of course they do. The ideal is inherently anti-feminist. Well, especially third-wave feminism that tries to say that gender doesn't even exist. And really, a lot of first-wave feminists would probably be quite happy with this. A lot of first-wave feminists would not have want women to be immodest and, frankly, promiscuous with their sex life. So, really, when we say it's anti-feminist, it's only anti-third-wave feminist. Maybe anti-second-wave as well. But then the examples of these links is a picture of Nick Fuentes, who, whenever he talks about women, he is just trying to be edgy all the time and not particularly funny. And when he does actually get on interviews and is being interviewed by women, he tries to put them down all the time, and he just is an embarrassment with it. So, not a very good example of this, given that I don't even think he's ever had a girlfriend. I think he prefers cat boys. Next is Jordan Peterson. I mean, fine, I'm quite happy about that. And with Jordan Peterson, I mean, his wife has a job. There's some traditional roles that he fulfills with his wife as well. But again, they've probably talked their way into having quite a good system between them that appears to work. And he would absolutely not be for women being essentially chained into a kitchen all day. So again, it's quite ridiculous, the implications that Ash is making here. And then to end up with Andrew Tate, who is just... he's the left wing's boogeyman. The left wing have talked themselves into saying that he is popular with the right wing. Andrew Tate isn't that popular with the right wing. He's popular with edgy teenage boys. He's not a serious political figure. So all these examples, I mean, Jordan Peterson one, pretty good. The other two... I mean, this is the other thing as well. These have links to the far right. What are the links? I don't know. Here's some pictures of some far right people. One of which isn't even remotely political. One of which isn't remotely far right. And then Nick Fuentes, who you probably could say is a active political figure. That's fair enough. And I think it's fair to say far right. So well done. You found one. oh, he's terrible when it comes to dealing with the women issue. Yeah, I don't think he'd be for all this tradwifery, I'm not gonna lie. I think he's gay.
It's part of a wider shift of young people being dissatisfied with neoliberalism and wanting social change.
Which is quite a mad thing to say, because Margaret Thatcher was very much still quite a tradwife, even as Prime Minister, the most important job in the United Kingdom. She would still cook for her family, and she would cook for guests. And she very much loved her husband, who was a very important businessman and constantly on business trips. Though having said that, she was particularly busy in her younger days as a younger mother, and had her twins looked after mainly by a nanny and at boarding school. In other words, the mother of neoliberalism had a very, very wholesome family life. And yes, she would probably be actually very happy with these young women making these choices and doing what makes them happy and having successful families. She would very much be in favour of that. The mother of neoliberalism would probably like this type of thing.
So, let's talk about the way in which tradwife culture presents the ideal relationship.
Finally, instead of having these tenuous links and these problems, I mean, I do really enjoy that one. Neoliberalism makes women want to return to kitchen. Well, I'm not going to lie, Ash, I think a lot of women just don't like working. I think a lot, especially when they become mothers, find the meaning in their life when that happens and do want to do what's best for their kids as much as they can. Of course, they need breaks from their kids every now and then. Everyone does. Kids are quite hard to bring up, from what I understand. But to blame it on what Ash thinks is neoliberalism, it's just silly to me. Because as I mentioned before, this tradwifery was still going on quite a bit in the 80s when neoliberalism was being implemented, so... I just don't know what she's talking about there. The three problems are useless, but anyway, let's get into the nitty-gritty of this.
Men are providers, which means that only they participate in paid work and make all the financial decisions.
See, immediately, wrong. Majority of the financial decisions will be between the husband and the wife. It will be talked about, and then they will make most of their big financial decisions together in a relationship like this. And then when it comes to domestic work, who's going to be making most of those decisions? Who's going to be making the decision what food to buy? Who's going to be making the decision what type of paint the man should buy when he ends up painting rooms? Or they end up painting rooms. More than likely it's going to be the woman, because most men aren't really too bothered about that. I'm going to be honest with you. The whole point is that the man is trying to make the woman happy by making her feel financially secure with her own purchases. It's just a bit of a meme that the man has all the money and then controls it all. Don't get me wrong, some men absolutely do that. Typically, from what I see, families like that end in divorce.
He is responsible for the final say in all of our financial decisions.
Yeah, okay, this tradwife has said this particular sentence, that the man is responsible for the final decision of all financial decisions. Okay, how often is that just a rubber stamping of a woman saying she wants something? We don't know. We can't tell from that. But honestly, a lot of women, I think, have this instinct of just, I am with this man because he is capable. I trust his final decision. That is my choice. But Ash is trying to make out that absolutely no conversation is happening and the man is just in complete control of this financial decision, when really what that sentence implies is that there has been talk about it. She has come up with something she thinks would be a good decision, but ultimately he has the final say. And if that works for her, that's absolutely fine. But Ash is taking the worst possible interpretation of this, because she's trying to push a point in this video. But I'm not going to spoil what that point is in the end, because you can tell at the moment it is just, this is misogyny. But oh boy, it gets worse than that.
And this is presented as a kind of equality. While men and women have separate roles, they are equal in their value.
Yes, it is incredibly valuable to have masculine energy and feminine energy in a relationship. Well, a heterosexual relationship anyway. Quite literally from the start of time it appears to have worked. Why all of a sudden in the 21st century do we think we're better than literally millions of years of evolution? Why do we think we can finally beat it in this era? Well, it's because we think we're past all that, because we overestimate our rationality. But to be honest, our rationality is actually very, very flawed, and Ash needs to understand that.
Insisting on the equal value between paid employment and unpaid care work, which, by the way, is a feminist position, hence the Wages for Housework campaign of the 1970s.
I mean, this is the funny thing about this. All that movement seemed to be was women demanding that they get paid for their housework from the government instead of a husband. All that's happened there is that instead of being, in Ash's head, chained to a husband, women want to be chained to the government instead. I mean, this is just very feminine energy, which is fine, by the way. Women want to feel like they've got a masculine thing, whether it's a person or the state, that they feel will provide them stability. That is what this is. That is what this unpaid care work movement is about at its core. It's women wanting stability, and they don't want it from a husband. Why? Well, to be quite frank with you, second and third wave feminism just seems to hate men.
Gets twisted into something much more sinister. Willingly giving up financial independence.
Relying on the state for your stability is still not independence as much as you'd like to think it is. And look, when I say women want stability in some masculine form, whether it's the state or the man, I'm not even saying all women want that. There are plenty of women who have never got married and who seem fairly happy with their life. But it's a fool's game to try and say that that's going to be typical for all women. It's not even true for all men. Not all men want to be a CEO working 80 hours a week and basically never having any time to themselves. It takes a very unique mind to want that. It just happens that more men have that unique mind than women, and that's fine. But of course, when you realise that there is no such thing as the average man or woman, this thing makes a lot more sense. There are a lot of women who will find one type of lifestyle makes them happy, another will find another type of lifestyle will make them happy, and Ash's problem here is that she thinks that this particular lifestyle turns you into a far-right extremist. That is what she's trying to say here, and it is incredibly silly.
It wasn't until the 1960s in America and the mid-1970s in the UK that women had the legal right to open their own bank accounts or access credit.
The implication here is going to be that these tradwives think that we should return to a time before that. But again, I don't see any evidence that any of the women are saying this, because these women seem to just want to make these decisions for themselves, rather than saying that all of society has to be like this.
Which meant that many women, particularly if they didn't work, were entirely financially dependent on a man, and this dependency didn't create happy marriages.
Yeah, I can imagine that's probably true. Having said that, women could have some control over the finances. It would just have to all be signed off by their husband. I, like the woman before saying, I let my husband make all the final financial decisions. Well, a lot of that might have ended up in rubber stamping, but with that much financial control written into law, yes, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that there will be a large number of men who indeed did end up being a bit draconian about it all.
As Betty Friedan found in her 1963 book The Feminine Mystique, middle-class American women who were living the suburban dream of husbands and housewifery were fucking miserable.
I always do get quite annoyed about things like this. She is actually unironically doing the meme, because she is unironically saying the 50s were not a happy time. And here's the thing, people's grandparents are still alive that lived through this era. This is still within living memory. And most people who were asked about this, they actually liked it. They liked it quite a lot. And even in their old age, they have still been trying to live like this, because it did make them happy. I mean, I'm just saying, Ash, divorce rates are way higher for younger people than they are for people who lived through this era. That's all I'm saying, Ash. And don't get me wrong, there were probably some women, probably a large number, who were probably very miserable in times like this. In fact, many of those women are probably alive today and tell you why they thought it was miserable. But this is why the tradwife thing is an okay thing. Clearly, it worked for quite a lot of people. So clearly, it's going to work for a lot of people today, and these women are just saying, why don't you give it a try, it's making me happy. I don't understand the issue with that. And to use an image of an advert for painkillers with the implication being that the husband beat the wife, it's like, yeah, no tradwife is saying this is a good thing, actually. I suspect that most tradwives would say, yeah, we're with husbands that don't beat us, and we're happy about that. You know, a lot of them will say, don't be with a husband that beats you.
In the 1950s, the average age of marriage for women was falling, and the number of children they were having was rising.
Okay, bit of a weird point to make, but let's go on.
In order to roll back on the relative social autonomy of women in the 1930s and 1940s, post-war American culture had begun to relentlessly focus on the idea that fulfillment for middle-class women meant being a housewife.
And as I've just gone through, a lot of those marriages actually did end up quite successful, and a lot of the women did end up being quite happy in their marriage. Yes, it didn't work for all, and this is what I'm saying, Ash. It's a good thing we have the choice today, isn't it?
For working class women, of course, they were just meant to be the middle class women's nannies, housekeepers, and helpmates.
I like how Ash Sarkar has undermined kind of everything she's just said with that point there. In the 1950s, they said women were only going to be happy if they weren't working and were in the home making it a happy place. Of course, if you were working class, you would be very miserable having to work for other families. I don't understand, Ash. I thought women going to work and having autonomy was a good thing. Now you're making it out like if they have autonomy and work for other people, that's a bad thing. Which is it?
But even with the labour-saving technology of dishwashers, washing machines, and the sweat of women poorer than them, still the suburban wives of America were not satisfied.
Well, it's just human nature, isn't it? We're never fully satisfied. That's why there's constant talk about going to space. We're not satisfied with the Earth. We want to explore everything there is to explore. And doing so will obviously bring us prosperity, because there's a lot of rare earth elements out there that we need.
Frieden identified high rates of depression, dissatisfaction, and dependence on barbiturates.
Man, those rates have really improved today now that women have autonomy. It's naturally like people are generally neurotic, and women slightly more so. And it's almost like they like taking drugs that make them feel less neurotic. Like, this didn't only happen in the 1950s. There are millions of people on antidepressants these days.
Women being forced into a life where they were denied autonomy and the use of all of their mental faculties was decimating their mental health.
And again, Ash, we have moved away from that, and I think it's fine that women have autonomy these days. I actually happen to be for it. But now that that's happened, they're still dissatisfied, and there's still a depression epidemic out there. So I don't think blaming it all on traditional marriages is necessarily a good idea. I think the problem is elsewhere. And if it works for some of these women, again, I don't see the problem. None of these women are saying that everyone should be forced into this. You are making a pointless point here.
And with financial independence limited, or in some places impossible, it was incredibly difficult to get out.
Well, it's a good thing we solved it then, isn't it, Ash? Please, can I have a decent point about these trad wives now?
Though the trad wives of 2023 talk about men being in control of the household finances like it's a charitable act. Oh no, my stupid lady brain can't cope with taxes.
That's a really weird point, especially for the UK, because pretty much all our taxes are done automatically anyway. You know, I know in America you have to, every April, or before every April the 1st, hand in your tax form to the IRS and all that. In the UK, it just comes out your wage automatically anyway. It's your employer's responsibility. So it's a bit of an odd point to make, but yes, if these women don't want to have to worry about money, and they want to put that into the hands of the man, that's fine. Again, my dad pretty much does all the budgeting, and luckily he lives comfortable enough where Mum will come home one day, say, hey, I've brought this new coffee table. Dad'll go, oh, for God's sake, all right, here's the money. And I'm not going to lie, that pretty much seems like the dream to me. And I'm sure my real queen, whom I simp for very deeply, will enjoy the stability that I can give her. And hey, when it comes to budgeting, we might do it together. Or she might want me to do it. I don't know. It's a thing we're going to have to end up talking about when we do eventually get a house. But again, if it works for her, that she wants me to do it all, and I'm happy with that, what's the problem, Ash?
It's a hugely dangerous thing to do.
I very much do so ask permission to spend any kind of money, even $1. I will ask.
Yeah, okay. Works for her. I think it's a bit odd as well, Ash. But guess what? You're making it out like she's stuck in the 1950s and doesn't have a way out. We don't live in the 1950s. She can actually leave that relationship if she wants and still have full autonomy, which should be the ideal for society. But for Ash, if no one is doing as everyone else is doing in the communist utopia, then they are doing something wrong and are a subversive.
According to Women's Aid, nearly a third of abuse survivors say that their access to money during the relationship was controlled by the perpetrator. A quarter report that their partner did not let them have money for essentials during the relationship, and a third have had to give up their home as a result of the abuse or leaving the relationship.
And believe it or not, none of these trad wives are saying go into an abusive relationship you don't want. Yes, money is quite a big thing when it comes to abuse in relationships. I do understand that. But when these women are perfectly fine with having the man controlling the money, that's not abuse, that is something they have chosen. Unless you're suggesting they've all been gaslit into it, which, I don't know, could be a possibility, but I've got no reason to think that at the moment, so I'm not going to jump to that conclusion.
I'm not saying that every relationship where men are in charge of the finances is abusive. Just that giving up your financial autonomy and placing it in the hands of your partner is highly risky if things do indeed go wrong.
Alright, fair point, I agree with that. Nothing wrong with that. I take it back, it turns out Ash is being quite liberal on this point, so that's fair enough.
If you've ever spent time on Tradwife TikTok, you'll notice a certain irony. That despite rejecting modern womanhood, its advocates love nothing more than appropriating the language of feminism in order to advance anti-feminist goals.
Well, yeah, that's just basic language games. The leftists do that all the time. It seems a very effective tool in the culture wars. You bastardise language until it means something completely different to what it originally meant. I mean, take woke, for example. That used to just mean you are aware of social issues perpetuated against black people, I think it was originally, or racism against black people. Whereas now it just means someone who insists on only looking at issues through an intersectional lens. But then the left wing do it all the time. Neoliberalism, for example, that is simply an economic paradigm shift moving from Keynesian post-war consensus economic models to ones basically run by Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, where generally it was a move towards a smaller state, less taxation, and deregulation, but now it basically just means anything that the modern world does economically. Despite the fact we are now in a post-Keynesian economic paradigm, still called neoliberal by leftists because they're idiots.
Because men and women are so different, and that is okay. We as women just need to learn that that is okay. Stepping into your feminine side is okay. Being a mother is okay.
I usually take clips like that out because they don't add anything, but this one I kept in for a specific reason. I don't understand how that is playing language games, Ash. She is literally just saying it is okay to be feminine, it is okay to be a woman, it is okay to be a mother. So I just don't understand what language games come in there. This video has really bad examples of the points you're trying to make.
Once more, this dresses up being explicitly submissive to your husband as an act of individualist liberation.
Okay, I can see that being an example of language games. Do you have an example of a woman doing this?
But the simple truth is
Apparently not. Okay, Ash, what is this simple truth?
that if it were possible for men and women to be socially equal but financially unequal, the tradwife trend wouldn't be popular with reactionaries and the far right.
I'm going to be honest here, I've rewatched that clip about 10 times. I'm still not sure what point she's making. Like, honestly, the first part of that sentence is a bit of a word salad. So she said, the truth is, if it were possible for men and women to be socially equal but financially unequal, it wouldn't be popular with the far right and, you know, people she doesn't like, essentially. So I think what she's trying to say is that, in truth, far right and reactionaries, or people like me, don't actually see an equal social value in men and women because there is inherently an economic dissimilarity between men and women in these tradwife relationships, which is a nonsense because Ash is taking social value to mean the same thing for men and women, when in reality there is a different social value to men and women, and what we are saying is they are both equally important to put forward in a marriage, a bit like, you know, yin-yang. It's almost, it's not opposites, but it's two different things coming together and making something beautiful and that works. That's what marriage should be, and as these tradwives are showing, is for them. So in this case, a social value is the women are bringing up the family and the home, the man is going out and making the money to make that possible. That's the social value there. The financial value does actually come into the social value there. And obviously men do other things like do the DIY and things like that, you know, they provide. And both things, to people who want traditional marriages like that, see that as equally valuable. But Ash can't see that because Ash is a communist and thinks men and women need to be equal on absolutely every plane of existence. Trads don't really see it that way.
Is the very fact that it advocates women voluntarily surrendering their autonomy by presenting it as an aspirational lifestyle, which makes it so popular with conservatives, misogynists, white nationalists, and religious fundamentalists.
Well, yeah, but they all like it for completely different reasons. They value different things in these traditional marriages. I mean, to say that they like it because it makes sure women can't do what they want, that's a bit short-sighted. That will certainly be true for some of those groups that you mentioned, but that's not the reason I like it, and I don't want to be in a marriage where my partner isn't as important or influential in that relationship as I am. You know, it should be a reciprocal thing.
She was not wife material. I had to chop and screw her mind a little bit. I was playing like Operation with her brain.
Tash, if you're watching this video, I think you will admit that you have been playing Operation with my brain to make me better husband material. And I don't think that's a bad thing. If you want to spend your life with someone, why wouldn't you almost let them know how you can make it work for life like that? If you don't think someone is wife material for you, but you want to try and make them more wife material for you, I don't think that's a problem. As I'm sure my girlfriend will happily say that she has made me more husband material for me. And I do very much appreciate that.
The tradwife trend sits in the middle of an online content network, drawing together different subcultures, movements, and interests.
Ash, it's from this that I can tell Ash does not pay attention to what the far right actually say and do. Because a lot of them think that the TikTok tradwife trend is just a fetish. And I can see what they mean by that. With some of the clips that Ash has shown here today, they are effectively just being slightly more modest Twitch thoughts. With flowery sundresses, but let's be frank, they are still showing quite a lot of cleavage. And that's not true for all of them, that's just for the ones that clearly are trying to get male attention. And given I'm on Twitter probably more than I should be, and I get quite a lot of people that Ash would describe as far right in my feed saying such things, I can let her know that yes, she is wrong about this. A lot of far righters do not like the tradwife TikTok trend because it is just fetishizing what they actually want. And then when it comes to women like Abby Shapiro or Lauren Chen, who are actually espousing tradwifery in a realistic sense and saying this is how you can actually dress modestly, they're completely silent about those two because it's not a TikTok trend and it's not getting millions of views. It's getting quite a lot of views, but they just ignore it. Probably because it's not making waves online.
Its focus on homemaking connects to other lifestyle content like recipes, interior decor, skincare, soft life, and homesteading, which is like farming but made aesthetic.
I mean, yeah, there's obviously going to be quite a lot of overlap with other traditional things like, you know, everyone cooks. Cooking is a traditional thing. Homesteading, that is also a traditional thing. That was very, very popular, especially in America, between its founding and up until hyper-urbanization started happening throughout American cities. But Ash is basically trying to imply here that be wary of when you're looking at people making aesthetic farms and cooking because they might be far right. That's essentially what she's trying to say here.
Its interest in marriage and relationships, obviously, links to dating, psychology, and self-help.
Yes, dating magazines and self-help magazines might be far right too, apparently. Or you might see these TikToks if you like looking at things like that, I suppose. So be careful is what she's saying. It's a bit of a left-wing moral panic, and that's why I'm quite happy about this, because it means it's working.
And its rigid belief in fixed gender roles, its rejection of feminism and liberal, left-wing or progressive values, and its emphasis on Christianity, means that it has lent a feminine veneer to conservative far-right and white nationalist ideologies.
Well, it's just a madness thing to say that, isn't it? You are forced into these rigid gender roles. No, again, they made the choice. And again, in reality, it's probably a lot closer to what I was describing before, where the man does more of the physical labour and the providing, the woman does more of the childcare and the homemaking, but in reality they probably do a bit of both, just more of the traditional roles. And yes, it is somewhat of a rejection of the modern world, or in Ash's language, liberalism and progressivism, where really I don't think it is a rejection of liberalism, but it's certainly a rejection of progressivism. But then it's the last part that blows my mind. It's got a focus on Christianity. I don't see that in these videos, really. And again, from the two examples I know of women that do push this thing, you know, Lauren Chen is a Christian, fair enough. Abby Shapiro's Jewish, though, so that doesn't even quite work. And then to move that onto, oh, it's for white nationalism and the far right, well, then that can't be true, because Abby Shapiro is quite a popular tradwife influencer, if you want to call it that. And how's she going to be far right and white nationalist if she's Jewish?
One thing that comes up again and again is this idea of women submitting to their husbands as a form of submission to God.
Wives, respect your husbands. It's biblical. It's in the Bible. You treat your husband as the head of the household and obey him. It's a sacrifice, but it is a sacrifice well worth it.
Whoever edits these videos, and it's just embarrassing at this point. Ash's claim, time and time again, women, these tradwives say, submit to your husband because you need to submit to your husband to then submit to God. You know, it's biblical. And then, in her 3 examples, one person brings up Christianity. The other 2 say, it's a sacrifice, but it's a sacrifice that brings great joy to my life. How is that related to Christianity? again, these clips are not evidence of your point, and so it therefore just undermines it.
And this is meant to be a reciprocal relationship. You, as a woman, don't have to feel degraded by submitting to your husband, because the premise is that his religious beliefs stop him from behaving badly.
You want your wife to follow you? Be a man and follow Jesus and give her a reason to.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Her whole point before, women shouldn't do this because it can lead and risks abusive relationships. And now, here, I mean, it's a man, it's not a woman, but here is an example of her saying, oh, they also say don't find abusive husbands because that's bad. So you've just undermined that entire point before, and then for some reason, because people are saying don't be abusive if you have a Christian husband, they're probably not going to be abusive because if you follow Jesus, you're not an abuser, or you shouldn't be an abuser, sorry. Then what's the issue with that, Ash? They're saying don't be with someone who is abusive. Like, that's obvious good advice. But your issue is that it brings Christianity into it. I don't understand the issue with that.
If only we had any history of religious men wielding their power to abuse those more vulnerable than them.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. So, clearly, Ash Sarkar has a Netflix account, because those are all images, and this is the best part of this, by the way. These are all images from one extremist Mormon sect. One that is not even accepted by, I mean, Mormonism isn't really accepted by mainstream Christianity, full stop, but this sect was not at all accepted by the Mormons' mainstream church. They hated this sect because of how ridiculous it was, and Ash is right. In the Netflix documentary Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, it's a decent series, I genuinely recommend it. It's a story of women who escaped a Mormon sect where they believe they had a prophet incarnate in this particular family in the Mormon sect. And they were essentially the pope of this sect, and they're infallible in what they say goes. And so obviously at one point in this Mormon sect, I mean, in Mormonism you used to be able to have 4 wives. They went further than that, and men can have an unlimited amount of wives, but obviously the higher up in the hierarchy you go, the more wives you get. And women are just ultimately completely controlled in it. And they are just completely indoctrinated into it, and all of the prophet's wives are, well, most of them, some of them escaped obviously, but most of them are still very much devoted to him. And yes, it is through an abuse of being a religious preacher. And the thing that gets me with this is that it is something that is so rejected by not only mainstream Christianity, but mainstream Mormonism as well, that to say it's as all likely that your average Christian is going to end up having 78 wives that he is going to completely control and not let them have any independence and say, you need these rigid gender roles. And they even control their hairstyle and what they can wear. Yeah, that's just not a reasonable thing to say. And again, a big difference that Ash keeps ignoring with these trad wives, they can leave relationships at any point they want. They're actually allowed to do that. With this Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey documentary, yeah, the women, they had a really tough time escaping the compound. And to be honest, because of the polygamy there as well, if you are a Mormon in this sect and you happen to be a boy and you are very low ranking in the church, you're effectively used as a slave. So, I mean, which is worse? Submitting to a husband that you think you love and have been indoctrinated to love, or being a goddamn slave? You know, it's horrible for everyone involved, don't get me wrong. But I suppose if you're born a boy, at least there's a chance you'll be somewhere up in that hierarchy. If you're a girl, you are equally oppressed. But we're talking about trad wives, so yeah, the women are all oppressed. That's bad. Some of the men happen to be very happy having 70-odd wives. The men at the bottom, though, everyone just forgets about them.
Like with the example of finances, the idea of submission is that by giving up her independence, autonomy, and power, a woman will be taken care of by a good and godly man.
Well, yeah, but again, we're not in the 50s. They're not forced into it. Obviously, the women looking for these type of men will have an absolute wealth of choice. Because, and I have experience in this, believe it or not, the dating pool is absolutely horrific for people that want a good partner. So, again, thank God I found my real queen.
She serves him, he serves Christ, but only one person is scrubbing out the toilet.
Yeah, and only one person is going out doing a job they probably hate to make sure there's a roof over their head. Like, yeah, as I say, I'm fine with partners discussing how it's going to work, but clearly there's tradwifery working here, and you're saying, oh, this is just like the 50s and all the worst examples I can think of that, when you're just speculating and making that up.
But the influence of fundamentalist religion extends far beyond whatever private arrangements a couple may have as part of a household. Tradwife culture is dominated by aggressively anti-abortion, anti-birth control, and anti-sex views.
Again, Ash pointing out that people living traditional lives have traditional views. Yeah, no duh. This is for those type of people, Ash.
Using the language and aesthetics of wellness influencers, tradwife, religious and conservative advocates have taken to TikTok in order to push disinformation about birth control. This can range from falsely calling the pill a carcinogenic.
That's not actually misinformation. It's actually true that the pill is carcinogenic. Here's a background section of the Canadian Association Medical Journal saying that yes, in fact, hormonal contraceptives and hormonal replacement therapies are classified as carcinogenics to humans, i.e. Group 1 carcinogenics. I mean, I thought this was common knowledge, but apparently Ash Sarkar doesn't know this, but yeah, it actually increases the rate of breast cancer, although ironically enough, it also reduces by a larger amount ovarian cancer and cervix cancer as well, I think. So it's a bit odd in that, yes, it is a carcinogenic because it does cause cancer, but in other ways it also reduces the chance of you getting certain other cancers. So yes, when that clip said it's a Group 1 carcinogenic, that's actually true, Ash.
To hyping out the rhythm or pull-out methods on social media.
I mean, to be honest, I found it a bit odd that tradwives are telling you contraception methods, but I don't know why the pull-out method always kind of gets laughed at. It's 96% effective when done properly, and I suppose the emphasis there is on done properly. Well, that's only 2% less than using a condom. And again, that's only 98% when it's done properly. Emphasis on done properly. So I'm not really seeing the issue with letting people know of alternative contraception methods if they don't want to go on hormone pills or anything like that. But I don't know, according to Ash, everyone needs to be on 1 million pills a day maybe, who knows?
Just to be clear, these are less forms of contraception than they are playing pregnancy roulette.
I mean, I suppose to be fair to Ash here, these, I'm seeing statistics from anywhere between 80% to 96% for the pull-out method, but again, it's dependent on whether it's done correctly, and for the rhythm method, again, 75 to 90% are the statistics. So if you go to the lower part of that, you know, that's about a 1 in 4 to a 1 in 5 chance of it failing. You know, that might be way too high for some people, but again, I don't think tradwives, unless they're Catholic, would be against the use of condoms, which are a lot more effective. And I think taking pills to not get pregnant, I can see why a lot of women would not want to do that. I mean, taking hormonal pills as well can cause further complications. It does so in many women, so they might not want to do it for that as well. But again, I'm not seeing anything on condoms, and I don't see a reason why they wouldn't be saying use condoms as well if you don't want kids, so I don't know what to tell you. I need you to show me more, Ash.
As well as celebrating the overturn of Roe versus Wade, some tradwives have allied themselves with the conservative right by taking aggressively transphobic stances.
Again, Roe versus Wade didn't actually make abortion necessarily illegal. It just didn't make it legal on a federal level. Individual states can still decide whether abortion is legal or not.
Contrasting trans, queer, and even just feminist women to their authentic, natural, and politically reactionary model of femininity.
Again, women generally having traditional lives have traditional views. Who would have thunk?
There's a conspiratorial edge to some of the big tradwife social media accounts, from pushing anti-vax and anti-mask content, to claiming that feminism and LGBT rights movements are part of a depopulation agenda.
Yes, well, the anti-vax people are silly, yes, I do agree with that. Anti-mask people, well, I still think it's questionable how effective masks actually were during the pandemic. They just seem to be a, here's how people can feel safer if they see everyone in masks type thing. As to the LGBT for a depopulation push, I mean, I'm gonna have to see evidence of what you mean there.
There's an overlap, therefore, between the tradwife trend and white nationalism.
Oh, for Christ's sake, yes. And Ash, there is an overlap between socialists and Antifa who have caused millions of dollars and pounds in property damage. That doesn't mean every socialist is Antifa. In fact, I'd probably suggest that very few of them actually are. But I wouldn't be surprised if most say they support it. However, when it comes to tradwifery, I reckon quite a lot, when asked, do you support white nationalism, would say, no, of course not. But of course, you're never going to be nuanced on this issue.
This overlap can be implicit, subtle, and unconscious, taking place through aesthetics.
Oh my lord, I love it. I I can't find an actual very good connection to white nationalism, so I'm just going to speculate a load of nonsense instead, because that's a lot easier than putting the work in, Ash. Or God forbid admitting you're wrong about something.
This might be using adverts of white nuclear families from the 1950s to stand in for the universal ideal marriage.
Oh my lord. The traditionalists are using traditional adverts for their memes. They must be racist.
Or contrasting the ideal trad wife to the stereotypical boss bitch, who's always associated with hip-hop culture and almost always black.
That is such a leap. Just a cursory Google of the word boss bitch, and what you end up with, the very first two, by the way, are white women. The third one is, I'm not even sure, I want to say Hispanic. A Hispanic woman, and then it's a load of boss bitch paraphernalia. Then you end up with Margot Robbie, a white woman, another picture of that ethnically uncertain woman again, and then at the bottom you finally get to some black women with boss bitch. So what Ash has done here is just made up what boss bitch means and what it refers to, because I have never ever heard of boss bitch being a almost always black woman thing. Ash has just made it up to try and smear them as racists.
This reinforces the idea that the ideal, most elegant, and most desirable model of femininity is white European. And women of colour are less feminine, more aggressive, and more in need of civilising.
The fact that Ash has read that far into it speaks volumes of her mindset, rather than it does from these tradwife TikTokers. I don't think well, maybe not any of them, I shouldn't say that, some of them might be white nationalists, but at the very least from the ones we've been shown so far, none of them have seemed racist, and it's just Ash trying to project racism onto it, because really at the end of the day, once again, this is the politics of vibes. Ash doesn't like the vibe of them, and when she doesn't like the vibe of something, she knows it has to fit in one of the boxes she has been accusing them of today. It's been all of them, really, hasn't it? You know, racism, sexism, all that. But the thing is, she really doesn't... I mean, this is why it's so much of a moral panic. She really doesn't want this trend to lift off, so she has to call them everything under the sun. And I think the only fair one so far, really, is that maybe there's some misogynism in there. I don't know. I don't follow them enough to know. From what I've seen, though, that's the only one where I think a case might be able to be made. But from what I've seen, it's women doing what they want, saying that it makes them happy, and saying to other women it might be making you happy too. I don't see any issue with that at all.
But the connections can also be more explicit. One mumfluencer called Wife with a Purpose issued a white baby challenge, calling on women to have as many white babies as possible.
Finally, it only took us nearly an hour into this video, but we finally got to a point where Ash finally has some explicit, concrete evidence. Yes, Steve King, I believe, is actually a far-right politician, at least Wikipedia says so, so that can mean anything from classical liberal to out-and-out racist. And yes, this is somewhat on the level of the Great Replacement Theory talking point, which is correct. A lot of white nationalists do push that narrative, and this is one of the solutions to it: have more white babies. Now, the details of all that aside, how influential is this Wife with a Purpose? Well, oh, look at this. 98 tweets on Twitter, less than 500 followers. Hardly representative of the tradwife trend, is it? Yet, this is how Ash is going to make her point. She's going to ride on this one tweet by this one practically nobody and make it out like this is a quite typical thing for tradwives. Guess what? Turns out it's not. But Ash and dishonesty go hand in hand, so, you know, slay you boss bitch.
Tradwives become an important component of the Great Replacement myth, pushed by white nationalists.
Yes, and quite clearly, you don't actually follow any white nationalists because you know that they don't actually like this trend, because they think it's too fetishised. They ironically think it's degenerate, it's just a way for women to play off a right-wing audience instead of a left-wing audience. And you know what, there's probably some truth to that, but that's besides the point. Ash doesn't know what she's talking about. She thinks that this is a central part, or this trend is a central part of the white nationalist movement. It's not. They don't particularly like it.
If modernity is defined by diversity, both of lifestyles and of ethnicity, then the tradwife marks the return to an era of social and racial conformity.
The shoehorning of the racism aspect of this is just painful. Again, I brought it up before. One of the biggest names on this trend, Abby Shapiro, she's Jewish. Why would this be central to white nationalism.
Women with choices and agency aren't usually so keen on submitting themselves to a life of reproductive captivity in the interest of furthering racism.
Thank God we live in that world then. I don't understand what a criticism of it is here. These women are making these choices. You idiot.
White nationalism, anti-choice ideology, and religious fundamentalism aside, if you want to know with certainty whether the tradwife trend is an empowering reclamation of domestic labour or just regular old sexism made palatable with TikTok aesthetics, just look at the kind of men who approve of it.
Oh God, this is going to be good, isn't it? This is just going to be 10 minutes of Andrew Tate.
I don't like girls who are over-sociable. I don't like girls who know lots of people.
Oh, classic. I knew that was coming. Yeah, I'm just going to skip this bit.
Here are two men, both accused of sex crimes by the way, who have made money by sexualising women.
Yes, the right wing hate them. And all they really say in that clip, by the way, is that they don't like girls who go out to clubs by themselves and start being promiscuous, because they don't think that that is going to be good material for them to be with forever. And yeah, they are pimps, essentially. Nobody really likes them on the right wing. They are just two people perpetuated by the left wing because they are everything they think the right wing are. But really, when you look at the right wing, all they really talk about when it comes to Andrew Tate is he shouldn't be deplatformed for his views. That's all they really say about it. But leftists, because they are complete morons on that subject, they think if you don't think someone should be deplatformed for something, that means you agree with them. And so therefore they think they're right-wing. It's nonsense. Anyway, I'm skipping all this Tate bit because it's just pointless going through. Because, yeah, alright, his Tate might be good or bad. I don't know, I don't really care. This isn't representative of the right wing, so I don't care to try and refute you.
Okay, so while I think all these things explain the political impact of the tradwife trend, they don't explain why it's so appealing in the first place.
Oh, because as you showed before, when women wanted free money for doing the housework from the government, they clearly just like relying on someone else for the money while they do the domestic chores. That's all that really came down to. Because why should someone else pay for your work you do in your own home to keep it clean and tidy? You should just be doing that anyway.
The answer is simple. Modern life, in many ways, sucks.
Oh God, life throughout history has sucked. We live in unironically one of the best times in history, even with all these economic collapses. I mean, just appreciate it. You're there listening to me, either on a handheld device that people from even 20 years ago would be like, oh my God, this is some sci-fi tech, and I have enough free time and disposable income to actually make videos like this. The reason I have so much time is because we have progressed so much. And yeah, some things do still suck. That's why I make videos, to point out what does suck. But my God, if you try and put this down to the economic system is the cause for this, then you are just way off. I think the real cause for this is actually just that women enjoy being the homemakers, and they enjoy the reciprocal relationship they have with a husband who will provide for them. I think that's why it's becoming a trend. Women just hate work.
It's hard to make the case in an era of low wages, high anxiety, precarious work, and extortionate rents that women are liberated just through entering the labour market.
Hang on, that was your issue with the 50s. You said it was a good thing. Women showed their worth through World War II by working in factories and all that, and in the 50s they made them more independent, and that was a good thing. And now what, you're saying because we're in economic decline, if you want to call it that, women feel liberated by joining the workforce? But I thought you wanted women in the workforce. You're making it out like it's a bad thing here. I'm so confused by your point.
Everyone knows by now that leaning in alone won't make you a girl boss. The relative economic security of previous decades, a job for life, housing you could afford, pensions, and a debt-free life has been obliterated in the slash and burn of neoliberalism.
I absolutely love it. You're showing Margaret Thatcher as the slash and burn of that thing. Home ownership went up. Wages went up. I mean, you just look at the economics of it. The economics of the 70s were a disaster. You then go through the 80s to then get to the 90s, i.e. Margaret Thatcher's time. Everything improves. Not just improves, everything gets so much better overall that it does indeed end up causing the collapse of the Soviet Union. Socialists hate Margaret Thatcher because she did essentially start the grand fall of the USSR. It shows socialism is not the way forward, despite how much we seem to be trying to move back towards it post the 2008 crash and post Tony Blair. I mean, just think about it. What Ash is saying here is that women's liberation should have been better in the 60s and 70s than it should have been post that, because of this slash and burn of the economy, when in reality the opposite has happened. So once again, Ash, talking about economics, doesn't know what the hell she's talking about.
If you're under 45 or you don't own a house, the future can feel fucking bleak. You add to that the experiences that many people have dating, like being ghosted or being treated like you're disposable. It's no wonder that people feel dissatisfied. Intensely so.
I absolutely love it. Oh, you can't afford a house and your future finances look a bit bleak. And then moving on to almost saying that the dating pool is bad because ghosting. I mean, it's just mad. And don't get me wrong, I am very empathetic. I think the dating pool is terrible, as I said before. But really, there's a large part of this that isn't being taken into account by Ash, in that if you do have a husband, he can focus all his time on work to get that extra money, which will then provide you with a better life and provide you with a better future. But I don't know what Ash is trying to say here. It's very confusing.
There is a longing for care, for order, for security and certainty. And the fantasy being sold by tradwives is that all those things are in reach for women. If only we give up our autonomy and return to the gender roles of an imagined and idealised past.
She's doing it again. This never existed. This image of a family never existed, despite all the people still alive who say yes, it was actually quite like that. It's just unbelievable scenes from Ash. I mean, it's actually no wonder. She is terrible with her history. So when it comes to actual history from people who are still alive today, living memory history, she just doesn't believe it. So how can you trust her on any sort of history that's happened in the past? What's the point in learning history if you don't believe any of it?
And that's the thing. The lifestyle being sold is a fantasy. It's fictitious.
I mean, that's such a strange point. Don't get me wrong. On TikTok, you are obviously only going to see the positives of it. It's like all social media. You only see the good parts of it. Obviously, there are going to be bad parts. But again, this is a realistic outcome because it has happened in the past and people have been happy with it in the past. And this is the amazing thing with this coming from Ash Sarkar, of all people. This whole tradwifery thing, apparently, is just imagined. It's made up. Says the socialist. Sorry, not even socialist. Says the communist. Who, when it has tried before, yes, it is a complete imagination. She says Shanghai's like stepping into the future. Well, the people who have defected from China don't really say so, do they? And your imagined utopia doesn't exist, yet you have the gall to say that tradwifery is a complete fantasy. And as I say, yeah, those TikToks probably are putting in people's minds a bit of a fantasy because you're only seeing the good bits. Of course, there's downsides to everything, but for a communist to say something that has verifiably happened in the past from living people, and they've been happy doing it, it's just a ridiculous statement.
As my colleague Moya Lothian McLean has argued, Tradwife TikTok doesn't really show images of domestic labour. It depicts domestic leisure.
Personally, I believe I'm not meant to work. I'm meant to do this all day.
What the hell is the difference between that then? She's clearly cleaning and cooking. I guess the difference is that they're doing it with a smile on their face. Like, quite clearly from these TikToks, they have very clean houses. Now, what you can question is, did they get a professional cleaner in to do that, or did they do it themselves? And that's a fair question to ask, but we have no evidence that they did get a professional cleaner to do that. So who's to say that they didn't clean their house, and that they're quite happy doing it while their husband's out working? I don't know. And if it is just a grift, maybe it is for some of the women. I don't know, it's hard to tell. But when you're saying it's not domestic labour, it's domestic leisure, I don't know what you mean other than there were some clips of women going to the gym and spending time with their pets. It was just such an odd thing to say.
It's like an extended session of playing dress up. You get to glide around wearing floaty skirts and dresses, organising your snack cupboard and baking bread.
I'm not being funny. Our family last weekend hosted a big family get-together. That is actually exactly what my mother did, just with less floaty dresses and more active wear. This actually does happen. This isn't a fantasy. This has actually happened. I just saw it last weekend.
And look, that's my idea of a nice day too. Who doesn't like an opportunity to feel gorgeous and eat nice things?
So what's the issue?
This idealised portrayal of domestic labour chimes with a wider social media trend of soft life, a lifestyle of skincare and sourdough, taking the path of least resistance and doing so aesthetically.
Yes, TikTok shows a ridiculously positive vision of things that these people do. I completely agree. That doesn't mean these people don't do these things, though.
As work has become less rewarding, literally, the workers' share is declining relative to asset wealth.
I don't know what the hell she means by that. The workers' share is declining compared to asset wealth. Whose asset wealth? you mean average asset wealth? I don't know what statistics she's trying to bring up there. I'm actually just confused by it. Anyway, she goes on a bit of a moan about the fancy of all this, so I'm just going to skip to the end, because if I've somehow held your attention for over an hour here, well done. But don't worry, it's nearly over now.
Work won't set women free, and neither will being ruled by men. It's freedom, equality, and reciprocal care that will.
See, reciprocal care, right at the end there, that is the whole point of this tradwife thing. They look after and specialise in one area of, the domestic care and all that. The men focus on getting the finances in. That's the reciprocal care. That's why it's equal value. And she just doesn't understand that. Because she is a Marxist, she thinks it's all based on the material. And if you are bringing in the finances, and even if you have the final say in the finances, that means that your worth is way more in the relationship as a whole, when in reality that's not necessarily true. But at the end of the day, as she says, women's liberation, it's best for them when they can choose what they want to do. Yet at the end of the day here, Ash is saying, well, being a tradwife, you're probably going to get abused, so best not to do that. And by the way, if you're a tradwife, you're probably racist. That's the underlying thing of all this. She just doesn't like the vibe and can't really work out why, so she just has to call it racist, sexist, misogynistic, whatever else. But with that, I think I've made my final point very clear, so I will end there. As usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.